Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Red Ice Radio. My name is Henrik from Sweden. This is independent internet radio. Hope you had a good week. Hope you're doing well overall. It's good to talk to you once again. We are talking with Mr. David Icke today, one of the most well-known authors and speakers, I would say, within the conspiracy field. And we're going to talk about his latest book, The Perception Deception. We'll just dive right in, so stay with us, everybody. Hi, David. Welcome back. Thanks for coming on with us again. It's good to hear your voice. Hope you've been doing well since we last spoke.
A pleasure, Henrik. Yeah, it's been interesting. Well, not quite 12 months. Actually, it's been an interesting 2 years or so because I've produced the biggest book I've ever produced. I did the Wembley event in 2012, and then I had the idea to start a television, internet television station, putting this information out 24/7, and put that little lot together. And there hasn't been much time for anything else.
No, exactly. I mean, it's amazing in terms of what you've managed to produce and get out to the public in that way, because there's so much material in there. I think the Perception Deception, your latest book, has to be the most comprehensive book, at least since The Biggest Secret. But I would say it's like all books crammed into one, pretty much, and a bit more than that as well, actually.
Well, it's nearly 1,000 pages. It's got about 900 odd illustrations and images and 32 pages of original artwork. So it's a comprehensive book. And there comes a point. I've been doing this now for nearly a quarter of a century, and all the books have been a progression. I said when I did the introduction to the first one back in 1990, called The Truth Vibrations, that I'm starting a journey, and maybe you'll come with me. And that's what it's been. And each book has been a progression in the story. In a way, each book has taken a step further down the rabbit hole. But each one has also had its specialization and its own personality and its own particular focus. For instance, The Biggest Secret had a massive focus on Satanism, on mind control, and on pedophilia among the elite and bloodlines that are connected to that. And so on. But the Perception Deception, you know what it's like when you're going along a journey of trying to understand more and more and more about what you're looking at and how it all works. And there are days when the kaleidoscope moves, when you wake up one morning, or maybe in the middle of the day, suddenly the kaleidoscope moves, and suddenly you can see it clearer than you could see it a minute ago.
Yeah.
And when I was writing the Perception Deception, it took me about 18 months in total, but 2 years overall, because I stopped to do the Wembley event, which was like the one this year in October. It's just a massive piece of preparation. I mean, I stand there and talk for 10 hours and ad-lib it, yes, but the preparation, research preparation, images preparation, and everything that goes around it is absolutely enormous. And so it was about 18 months to 2 years that it took to write. And in that period, I reckon 3 or 4 times the kaleidoscope moved, and suddenly it became so clear. And in the end, any genius is in seeing the simple in the apparently complex. And all genius is simple anyway. And so what we call reality must be the ultimate simplicity. It must be so simple. The way it plays out seems ever so complex because there are so many facets to it, endless facets to it. But at its core, it's dead simple. And the more I wrote and researched the book, the simpler it got. And the other thing that happens is you learn through experience what's interesting and what's really, really relevant. And there's tons of stuff that's really interesting and fascinating, but it's not absolutely relevant to actually understanding the nature of what we're facing and the nature of the reality we're experiencing. So you start to learn more and more about what to leave out and what to leave in. And although it's nearly 1,000 pages, it doesn't dwell on anything for long. What it does is connect a fantastic number of dots, which on the surface don't connect at all.
Yeah.
And you can really only understand where we are if we understand what's led to this and what's behind this. And I call it the perception deception because this, for me, is the foundation of everything. You know, the whole manipulation, the whole conspiracy in all its multiple forms is actually a perception deception, because you can't control billions of people physically. Not that there is a physical, but you know what I mean. Yeah. You can't control them physically. There's too many of the target population and not enough of you. Now, when you get to a point where you've got them microchipped so that you are externally manipulating their perception that way, when you've got them taking drugs, which is manipulating their perception, when you've got them in a complete slave situation, akin to the Hunger Games or that movie that really captured it in so many ways, called Equilibrium, came out about 2003. When you get people into that state, then you can start physically controlling them, because you have control of their minds to such an extent, and you have control of their movement to such an extent through 24/7 detailed surveillance that you can start to do it. But until that point arrives, you have to do it by perception. And even in that extreme state, you're just controlling perception, just in a more extreme way. And so when I look at society, I just see perception manipulation everywhere. It's in so many fundamental areas of our life. First of all, the education system. The education system is a perception manipulator's dream, in the sense that you take children increasingly now, earlier and earlier ages, 3-4 years of age, and you know they're not long out of the womb, and already now they're sitting there, and there's a control figure in the classroom who's telling them where they can go, when they can go, what they can do, what they can't do, what's right, what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, all of it. And then through that period, right into the teenage years, the system's representatives and the system's information download system called education is in control of most of what they hear and see and perceive. And then you have simultaneous with that, you have the mainstream media that's confirming all that the education system's telling them, and going on into adulthood when formal education's finished, again telling them what's right and wrong, what's happening, what's not happening, who's good, who's bad, what's moral, what's immoral, what this story is behind this world event, and all of it. And it's constantly creating a situation where people are downloading the system's version of reality. And if you're not strong in terms of being truly conscious beyond just 5 sense mind, then you're going to download that information, and it's going to become your perception. It's going to be your sense of self, your sense of the world, your sense of everything. And of course, all the people around you, unless they're conscious beyond mind, they've been through the same system, including your parents, from a very early age. Yeah. And they are confirming that everything you have taken to be true, because the system's told you, is actually true. And so I've used this analogy before, but I think it's very powerful. You're born into a madhouse, and that's all you've ever known. You've not left it. There's walls around the madhouse, and you grow up among the madness, among the insanity, and to you, that ain't madness and insanity at all. It's normal. This is normal. This is how it is. And so when anyone, knocks on the door and comes in and says, hey, this is a madhouse, this is crazy, what are you doing? You're the crazy one, because you're challenging their sense of normal. And that's why, Henrik, throughout history, when people that have been more aware, more conscious, have actually challenged the status quo and exposed the prison and the way the prison works, well, the prisoners have immediately started to attack the person that's telling them how it is. That great line in the first Matrix movie where Morpheus talks about people being so basically so programmed, so inured that they'll fight to save the system that controls them or protect the system that controls them. That's what you have, and it's my view. After observing things for a long, long time, that it's quite possible, and I think it's the norm, frankly, that people can go through an entire lifetime without having an original thought or emotional response that didn't come from the program.
Yeah, isn't that scary?
Yeah, but I think it's true. I mean, if you look at it, when you are sitting in front of a computer, as I am at this minute, you put information into the computer, and then before you press enter, you know what the computer's going to do, unless it's malfunctioning. You know what it's going to do because it's programmed to do that when you put that information in. And if you look around the world, there are exceptions, but they're rare, that if you put people in certain situations, they're invariably going to react pretty much the same. It's a reflex response. And it's my view, and I go into this in the perception deception, that when we read these accounts in the ancient world, all different parts of the world, about some interbreeding between a non-human force and humans to create hybrid bloodlines and what have you, but basically a manipulation of human genetics in general through whatever means, technological or whatever. I would say that a lot of people, and the Bible indicates this in the Garden of Eden, a story that you find all over the world in different forms. That was kind of the creation of humans. I don't think that was what was happening at all. I think it was a genetic tinkering with what was there before.
Yeah.
And that, because, as I've been saying for years, the body is a biological computer. You can put programs into it. You can put programs into its genetic structure, which will act like in response to a situation, like pressing enter on a computer. And I think there are emotional programs running through people that are constantly dictating their responses to life. And if you are a force, and I strongly suggest that this is what we're dealing with, that actually feeds off human low vibrational emotion, then if you can put emotional, low vibrational response, emotional programs into the computer software, if you like, and they are designed to react to certain situations, most of them surrounding the emotion of fear, then you are creating, in this time that we're in now, billions of, if you like, generators of the very energy that you feed off. And I see this when I observe people. Also, when you go into states of being, where states of awareness, where you are observing your, if you like, human self, your mind self, from another point of attention, you can see how this brain chatter, this mind chatter that's constantly going on in people's heads, is actually not coming from that point of consciousness that you move to when you go into other states of awareness. You're actually observing this computer chattering away, and you can feel or you can observe emotional states that are in no way coming from that level of observation in the greater expanded awareness. And it's like, I talk to people all around the world, and this is a common theme, and I've had it myself over the years sometimes, well, a lot of time when I was younger, and that is this underlying anxiety, which has often no explanation in the situation that you are facing at that time. My mother used to have a saying that she used to say about people, which was funny because she should have said it about herself, my mother. She used to say, "It's being so miserable that keeps them going." But my mother used to be addicted to worry. And this is an interesting point because people get addicted to low vibrational emotion because all emotion, part of the expression of emotion is it's a chemical process on one level. And the receptors on the cells that receive things like cocaine and heroin also receive the chemicals generated by emotion.
Right.
And people get addicted to emotional states. So if they, it's like if you're not worried about something, it's the case of my mother, she wasn't worried about something, then she had to find something to worry about because she was going into cold turkey. She needed a fix. There's that song, Addicted to Love. And that's another thing. When you have that rush, not of love actually, but of attraction, not love in its true sense, but of attraction, that generates a certain chemical response in the body, and people can get addicted to that. And so they are the people that go into relationships and they're head over heels, and then suddenly when that initial rush dies down, then they want to go somewhere else. They're off to someone else because they need that rush. And so there are many levels to which people are attached to emotion. I say they're if you like, vibrationally attached through the equivalent of a biological software program, which is, dictating their responses overwhelmingly. But there's also a chemical element to that, which people can get addicted to. And it's once you're in there, it's difficult to break out of it because it's almost like when you're offered a positive way out of something. I've seen this in so many people, Henrik. I don't know about you, but
yeah.
Someone's in trouble. They're not very happy, but they're getting their fix. And then someone offers them a way out of their unhappiness and a way to what they say they want. But they'll find a way of not going there.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they're still holding on to the fix. And they don't know they're doing that, but they are. It's addicted to worry, addicted to fear, addicted to anxiety, addicted to love and in its attraction sense. So I think that while we have freedom of thought and freedom of emotional response within the greater consciousness beyond this manipulated tiny frequency range we call the world, I think we have, unless we are coming from that level of consciousness and observing this world from that point of observation, so you actually can see what you're dealing with, I think people have far, far less freedom of thought and freedom of emotional response than they think. Because I think, if they're pulled into that level, that 5 sense mind level of perception, thus awareness, then the software has them.
Oh, indeed. Now, one thing I really like about the book as well is the way you've kind of just incorporated the whole concept of the archons into the main narrative, if you will, and on top of that, of course, kind of dividing it up and explaining the different components of it, basically, and how it works. But how would you? It's tricky to do, maybe in a nutshell, kind of thing. But what is the deception in regards to our perception? I mean, we see the world around us, we're experiencing it, we can feel it, we to a certain extent can understand it. But then what you're describing, of course, is a deeper level to what actually is going on underneath everything. And I mean, most people are not even aware enough to understand the physical reality around them. They're not even conscious of that. So to expect them to go a step further beyond that is something that few people seem to be able to reach to that point, if you know what I mean, David. Yeah,
I mean, when we say, what is this world? Well, it's something we're decoding into an apparently physical reality that cannot be physical. And even, the quantum physics arena and what mainstream science can appreciate that. So what is this world? You see, we have the feeling that we're in the world and we're experiencing, therefore, something outside of ourselves. The world that we perceive as the physical world we interact with all the time is actually only exists in that form in our decoded state, i.e., in the brain at that level. And so you can look into the night sky and you can see all those stars, and they're, I don't know, millions and billions of light years away, and it's so far away. And yet in the form that you are perceiving them, in that what I would say is holographic state, they only exist in a few centimeters of the brain, which decodes the visual senses into something we perceive to be something that we're seeing when it's actually something we are decoding. This is really important, because if it's something we're decoding rather than something we are in, i.e. a physical world all around us, then that means they who control the information we're decoding dictate our reality on that level.
Yeah.
But also, if you take this reality in its base state to be what I call the cosmic internet, the cosmic version of the wireless internet, if I'm on the internet, I'm attached to a global collective reality, which can be accessed by anyone all over the world that has a computer that can access the internet. Fine. But then I'm choosing where I'm going on the internet, and I'll choose something different to someone else because of my state of perception. Something that would interest somebody with another perception will not interest me. Thus, I go my way on the internet, the collective mind, the cosmic internet, and they go their way. And so it's not just that the information that's given to us to decode dictates our reality. It is our own perception is constantly dictating what part of that information we will decode and what we won't. I mean, there's an amazing figure that's in the book somewhere from mainstream science, that every second we are taking what they call impressions. I guess it's a bit like a still photograph, impressions of reality. And we're turning them into the reality we perceive to be part of. And it's something like 10 million impressions that we're taking every second. And according to mainstream science, the brain takes 40 of those to construct our reality second by second.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that if people imagine a wireless internet field as the prime base construct of this particular reality, then it's the perceiver who is deciding what part of that energy field in its multiple facets that you are taking from it. And part of that is the frequency you're operating on, but your perception is dictating that. And so if you look at social engineering, therefore, and different forms of individual and collective mind control, you take the analogy of a stage hypnotist. All those different things are manipulating what we decode into a perceived reality. It's like for instance, a simple thing, the Chinese computer system, that is firewalled so that it will not decode great chunks of the internet that the authorities don't want you to see. What if, and I suggest this is actually what's happening, that our decoding systems through genetic manipulation and other means of perception manipulation were actually firewalled so that we're only decoding a fraction of what there is to decode, and that is why visible light is so narrow, the band that we can turn into a visual world.
Right. Yeah.
And it's my this is my view, which I outline in detail in the book after 25 years nearly of researching this, that what the Gnostics said about the archons in the Nag Hammadi text found in 1945 in Egypt is very, very close to the truth. I'm using the term archons now for a simple reason, just to simplify it, because take reptilians, take greys, take the jinn of Islamic belief and pre-Islamic belief, take the various names that shaman use, take the demons of Christian belief. They're all the same thing. People. I have to smile a little bit when suddenly, when the information started circulating about the Nag Hammadi Gnostic text find in 1945 and what was in it, and they used the term archons, and it was like, oh, well, archons, that's it. And it's like, oh, he's using archons now. He's joining us. No, I'm not. I'm using a term that all over the world is describing something that there are endless names for. I could use demons just as easy as archons.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
So, but what they say,
it's a bigger concept there. What that message, what that relies on, what you're trying to communicate there. Definitely.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that one of the biggest pennies to drop for people when you look at this is when you realize that all these different names in different cultures are describing the same force. Look at how they describe it. They're describing the same force. And so, I've used archons in the book because it just simplifies it. But it's actually not a departure from what I've been writing about before with reptilians and stuff. And because I said in earlier books that, the reptilian entities were not the end of it. There was another force that didn't take form that was actually behind them. And that basically is what the Gnostics were describing with the archons. And of course, the Gnostics, the pre-Christian Gnostics of the Great Library of Alexandria fame and later Cathar fame and all the other expressions of them, they use the term Gnostics or Gnosticism, knowledge, but it was not learned in college, learned in school knowledge. It was a deeper awareness knowledge, a true knowledge, an innate knowledge. And what they described in the text that seemed to have been, buried, something the estimates are about 400 AD, maybe, or maybe written much earlier, centuries earlier. What they describe is absolutely stunning to me when I read it because of what I'd come across before, and how they describe the archons in the sense that they are energy in their base state. And I've interacted with them here and there in their electromagnetic form. But the way that they say that these energetic archons can take form, and that the two main forms they take are reptilian and like an unformed baby or fetus with grey skin and darker moving eyes, i.e. the classic greys. When you consider when that was written, that is stunning, and it indicates something that I've been talking about for a long time, and that's the fact that this manipulation, this archontic manipulation, shall we say, that takes the form of reptilian entities and other different forms that they take. It's been going on since way back in the illusion of time. So when people were knocking rocks together, these entities existed, and they had the level of knowledge they have now in terms of the manipulation. But what has happened is that they have manipulated the human frequency, if you like, the human dimension, to the point where they have brought humans to the point where they have the technological capability of completely imprisoning themselves, not least through transhumanism and such like.
Right.
But they have not been brought overwhelmingly to, in fact, they've been suppressed from getting to a point of awareness where they realize that's what they're doing. And, it's my view that what we call the archons at an energetic level are actually expressions of a distortion, an energetic distortion. If you look at what the what the Gnostics call the demiurge, the Lord Archon, Mr. Big. If you look at what people call Satan and the devil in all its different forms around the world, people, it's portrayed as some figure with, horns and a tail. And well, my view is that prime generator, that prime foundation of this archontic energy, which expresses itself in various forms, is actually an energetic distortion. If you think of a calm, balanced American landscape in the Midwest, and everything's calm and everything's fine and everything's balanced and everything's kind of joyous, and then a tornado comes through it and all hell breaks loose. And if you symbolize this distortion I'm talking about as like a tornado coming through, I think it's very close to what we're looking at. There was a time when this reality was far in advance of where it is now, where people were much more conscious, were much more aware of the interconnectedness of everything, where we did communicate with animals and nature and trees, and because we were communicating on an electromagnetic, on a thought level, without words, and it was in many ways the ancient paradise that many cultures talk about.
Yeah.
And then came this massive distortion, and I think the distortion actually, as it would, played out in the holographic world as fantastic geological and planetary catastrophes, which people like Velikovsky and more recently people like David Talbot talk about. And this distortion, like everything is in all existence, it has an awareness. And you take a distortion that is distorted so that it does not see life in a balanced way, it does not see situations in a balanced way, but it has self-awareness. You have a situation where the distortion, a self-aware distortion, has the ability then, or the capacity, to seek to impose itself on other areas of reality or energy, which at that time were not distorted, but it wants to draw them in. And if you are a distortion, you are a certain frequency band, and it's a different frequency band from balance, from harmony. Thus, if you want to feed yourself and energize yourself, then you need to create energy that will generate the frequency that you are feeding off. Otherwise, you cannot feed off it. And one of the great expressions of this distortion, as you would expect, is what I call inversion. Everything's inverted. So there's that great quote from a guy called Michael Elner about everything being backwards and upside down.
Yeah.
Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. The major media destroys information, and religion destroys spirituality. If you look at the world, it is inverted because this holographic world that we experience, I suggest, has become increasingly, more now than ever before, a holographic expression of the distortion. So you expect everything to be inverted. So you get inversions all over the place, like let's bomb Tripoli and let's bomb Libya to protect the civilians from violence.
Right.
Everything's twisted. Everything's upside down. It's just there's a reason for that. And when a tornado is hurtling through a landscape, it's pulling into its vortex all and sundry houses, cars, if it's powerful enough, and it's doing it by the energetic power, by the power of the wind that the vortex creates. And if you look at the electric universe level of this and the way that magnetism and electricity is at one level fundamentally a part of this universe. Where you look at a tornado, it's a fast rotating electromagnetic field. And so in many ways, if you're talking about is the fast rotating electromagnetic field, and we're talking about this distortion and these archons being energy in their prime source, then the analogy gets even better with a tornado. So,
sorry to interrupt, Dave. Let me ask you though: do you think that it's a natural, I guess, phenomena, the distortion that you're talking about, and because to a certain degree, I can understand that it might hold even a deeper purpose for us, like a force that actually at the end of it could act for something that would get us off our asses and try to get us out of the comfort zone a little bit and try to reach out there and get to somewhere else? Or is it a completely kind of negative force that is artificially created for the enclosing us into the illusion further? What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. My jury's out on that, and I look at both sides of that. But if you look at a tornado, it's created at a time of great electric and electromagnetic happenings in the atmosphere. So it's a child of a environment, which that environment eventually manifests like that, out of that sort of electrical storm, that electrical state in the atmosphere. So what actually made it happen in the first place? My jury's out on that. But if you look at like I say, that a tornado draws things into it because of the rotation and because of the wind that's created and all that. The distortion that the Gnostics call the demiurge is pulling forces into it through frequency compatibility. And so if it's going to do that, it has to draw its targets into its frequency layer, if you like. And there was that Native American concept of the wolf inside people, the two wolves inside people.
Yeah.
They said that one is evil. It is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And it said one wolf is good. It's joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion. And I would look at that and I would say that those two wolves, if you like, are different vibrational states. And the expression of the distortion, if you get pulled into it, manifests as the anger, the envy, the sorrow, the resentment, the arrogance, all that stuff, ego. And if you open your heart and express love in its true sense, and you hold integrity and all those things, your vibrational state cannot be lassoed by the distortion. Thus, you perceive life in a completely different way. But because this world that we're living in, or we think we are, is an expression of the distortion made holographically manifest more and more as it's got more control, we are constantly living our lives in situations that are designed to draw us down. And think of someone who's suffering from austerity, someone fighting a war, someone who has people fighting a war that they love, people who are caught in 9/11, people that are caught in Tripoli, and so on and on and on it goes. And then you look at the additives in food and drink. You look at the way the electromagnetic field has been dramatically changed in the last 50 years by millions and millions of times in terms of the increase in technological generated radiation. Yeah. You look at all that, and it's all designed, many other reasons for it as well, but primarily to draw us into this distortion. And these archons, I would suggest, are expressions of that distortion in eventually, at one level, apparent form like reptilians and greys and what have you. So we are then led to believe by many people that to respond to the situations manifested by what I would say is the distortion, that we have to fight for peace, fight for freedom, fight for rights. We have to fight the system. But what do we do when we do that? We just get pulled further into the distortion. That's what distortion wants. There are so many expressions of this distortion. I see it in people, even what I call robot radicals, those of the left, not all of them, but those of the left who think they're fighting the system when they're being played by a violin by the system.
Yeah.
And you get people who say they're fighting for good and they're fighting for justice, and you realize that actually fighting for justice is their persona. The justice is less of a focus for them than the process of fighting for justice, because that gives them a persona. I'm a good person, I'm fighting for justice. It's like a prop. Justice becomes a prop. Peace becomes a prop. Fair treatment becomes a prop. The greater good becomes a prop, not the prime theme, because one fantastic expression of the distortion has you is the me mentality. Because what the distortion is trying to do all the time in its multiple forms is to break up the unity of the target population, in this case, into warring factions. Now, you can play groups against each other. That's one level of it. You can play, and what you do is you isolate one group and you isolate another group, and then you play them off against each other. You do it with religions. You do it with factions within religions. You do it with political parties. But the greatest form of divide and rule is me, because that doesn't divide a group from a group. It divides an individual from everything else.
Right.
Because it's what about me? What's in it for me? All decisions are made by what's best for me rather than what's best for the greater good, which brings us all together. That brings unity. Me brings individual disunity from all other existence and all other expressions of individual points of attention. So me is massive. And if you observe society, you see that me is the greatest force of human oppression and suppression when you get down to it. Because even in a simple example, people in uniform, I'll give you a quick story, which it's a simple story, but it just encapsulates the massive concept that I'm talking about. Yesterday, we're parking a car in London, and of course, London is just for parking tickets and fines. It's just insane. And anyway, a lady is being given hassle by this traffic guy in uniform, and I called him over. I said, "Look, do you realize that you're fining people, giving them tickets for things that are not a problem? I mean, there's hardly anybody parked in the street, and you're giving tickets out." I said, do you understand the impact that you're having on lives with £60 or more fines of people who are already struggling? I mean, do you not think about the impact? And I said, it's all a scam, you know. It's not about traffic management. It's about getting as much money as possible for the local authority. Yes, he said, it's terrible. I don't agree with it. But you're handing the tickets out.
Yeah, there you go.
Come on.
Wow.
Why? Because it's the best for me. It gives me a job. Now, I can understand the mentality at a time of austerity of someone who does that. But you see, if people put the greater good first, they'd say, sorry, not doing it. And if you don't do it, and everyone has that idea, well, it doesn't happen. But because people will put a uniform on and they'll follow orders, many police officers do this every day. Not enough, mind, but many. They'll perceive that actually what they're doing is not right and not fair and not just, but they'll do it anyway because it's to keep their job. And so when you look at me, it is the fundamental divider and ruler of the target population. And until we start collectively putting the greater good first and saying not in any situation, what's in it for me, what's best for me, but what's the right and just thing to do in these circumstances, then this me, divide and rule will go on, which potentially, I don't know, we're over 7 billion, so they tell us, potentially me can create 7 billion isolated points of attention, isolated from the rest of this human family.
Yeah, and just connected to the bigger, the bigger picture also, that individual action has a repercussion, in the greater world. But it's an interesting story you mentioned that, because it's evidence of no principles, no morality in terms of inner understanding. It's just about what's on the piece of paper. That's what defines my rules and the law, and that's moral. That's okay. But I mean, there has to be a stance there. There has to be that type of mentality have to come to some kind of understanding about itself, that this is what's creating problems in the world. And I bet you too that person, David, they hate their job. They don't want to be there, so like, that should be their driving interest as a self-interest, should be to quit that job and to find something else to do, and to create not only a better place for other people, but for themselves as well. But even that basic understanding doesn't seem to be there. That's scary to me.
But this is the program, I would suggest, Henrik. It's the default position. When you've got a program, I another quick story. I spoke in Pasadena years ago, and there was someone in the audience that didn't agree with any of this stuff, because he had a whole long career in the military, and it was all a nonsense, and the system knew what it was doing, and touch me cap and all that. And he, to be fair, he sat and listened for about 7, 8, 9 hours. And he came in the dressing room at the end, and he was crying. He was crying.
Really?
Because he just realized actually it was real. And I'd never seen him cry before in my life. And within a week, probably less, it was a week when I found out, he'd gone back to his military mates and he rejected it all again, because he'd gone back to default position. The software had gone back to default. And this is what happens to people. And, these bloodlines that are manipulating the human society within what we call visible light, within this world, on behalf of these archons within the hidden, they are hybrid bloodlines for a reason. They are part human, because they have to operate here, and they have to be seen as human to operate here without being seen for what they are. And they are part non-human. Let's call them archon. Their various forms. Reptilian is a form they take for sure in genetic terms. And that means that if you go back from the hologram, that means that, they're not just genetically far closer than the general population are to this archontic force. They are, in vibrational frequency terms, very much closer. And thus they can be possessed more powerfully than the general population, or the general population can to a large extent as well. And let's look at that possession. People think about, and this of course is an ancient theme, possession, but you think about possession, people think about possession as the body's possessed. The body's not possessed, not directly. The electromagnetic fields from which the body is projected as a hologram, that's what's possessed. And what does possess mean? Connected with. And so if you have these archontic entities in an energetic form, and they can pull your electromagnetic fields, your energetic fields beyond the body into their frequency band through low vibrational emotion caused by low vibrational experiences and perceptions, then they can make a contact with you. And once that connection's made in frequency terms, their information can be fed into the possessed energetic field. Now, at its most extreme, that information becomes so infused into the electromagnetic field, the energetic level, that the information being projected as the hologram starts to reflect that infusion of possessed energetic information. And thus, that's when we have shape-shifting. Because now the hologram, which has been projected from the human field, is now being projected from a human field infused with more and more information that's not from the human field. Thus, the hologram projected from it must reflect that, and it starts to shift into a different form. And this is where you get this exorcist level of possession, where the face starts to distort. But there is that extreme level of possession, and then there's the, I would say, overwhelmingly general level of possession, which is simply pulling people in frequency terms on an energetic level into the frequency realm of the distortion in its endless forms. And at that point, the distortion starts to impact, here we go, that word again, on the perception of the possessed person.
Yeah.
Starts to influence the way they see themselves, they see the world. When you look at psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, these people that dominate the system, they are classic expressions of this distortion, this inversion of human normal, well, not just human, but balanced response. I mean, you'd never get a balanced response that abuses children, that tortures children, that sacrifices children. This is a fiercely extreme inversion of the natural response, because it's coming from the distortion. And things like, of course, the energy generated by sacrifice is perfect for this distortion in its various forms to feed off, because it's in the frequency. And you have this, and a lot of people have researched this, and I have massively over the years, and that's elite pedophilia. When you research and follow this bloodline network, invariably you'll find pedophilia and Satanism at the end of it. Mm-hmm. And why? What is it about pedophilia? This is what I would say from my research. The energy that this distortion, this archontic force wants to feed off more than anything else is the energy of children before puberty, because we see puberty as a hormonal chemical change, but that's just a reflection in the hologram of an energetic change that's going on. They want that energy before that change takes place. And so the pedophile in human form, if you like, the possessed pedophile, is the holographic vehicle for drawing off that energy, which the possessing entity then feeds off. That's why you find pedophilia at such an extraordinary ratio in these so-called upper echelons of society. And another massive part of this manipulation of the distortion, in an extreme way with the bloodlines, and an extreme way with the extremely possessed, but in a very significant way with the general population also. And that's to close down the vortex we call the heart chakra. Within, of course, I don't have to really tell people listening to this show on your station, mate, because they'll be aware of this.
Sure.
But for the few that won't be, very quickly,
yep.
This energetic field, or one level of it that I'm talking about, beyond the body, and interpenetrating the body, has different vortexes in it called chakras, which in the East, in Sanskrit, I think means wheels of light. And the prime one is the heart vortex, which is the center of the main seven. Top of the head, crown vortex, the third eye vortex on the forehead, the throat vortex of communication, the heart vortex, and then you go down into what I call the belly chakras, which are about emotion. And if you look at it, what's happened in human society is we've been moved from being a heart society where the point of interaction is through the heart. Again, we're into putting the greater good first, love in its true sense, integrity. We've been turned into a gut society, a belly society, and that's the chakra for emotion. We interact overwhelmingly with the world, humans these days, from a point of view of emotion, not heart.
Yeah.
And so what's happens is once this heart vortex is closed, or at least closed more than it should be, then we start to lose empathy. We start to lose compassion. We start to lose all the things that come from the heart center. Now, if you look at these bloodlines, Henrik, one thing they do not have, one thing psychopaths and sociopaths do not have, and narcissists do not have, if you look at even mainstream psychological psychology research, is empathy. It's empathy and compassion and a feeling for what you're making other people feel by your actions. Now, what I found fascinating, having said that, was that while I was writing Perception Deception, I was just reading this article by a Swiss clairvoyant called Anton Steiger. And he wasn't talking about archons or reptilians or anything. He was just telling his life story and some of the things he's experienced as a clairvoyant. And what can a clairvoyant do? They can see into the infinite energy field further than most people normally can on the level of visible light. And this is what he said, just in the middle of this article, out of nowhere. I was just giving an example of what he sees. And I say this is incredibly profound in terms of how this world is manipulated, and perceptions are manipulated, and behavior is manipulated. He said this: when I see people in business or politics who are particularly trapped by the material world, for example, I notice that they no longer have any light bodies at all. These are these other levels of energetic self. In many of these people, he said, the point of light at the heart chakra, which is otherwise always present, is no longer visible to me. Instead, I see something like a layer of shiny tar around them, in which a monstrous being in the shape of a lizard can be distinguished. When such people speak on television, for example, I see a crocodile shape manifesting itself around the person like a concave mirror. I don't see the light of their throat or forehead chakras. And what he's describing in that way is this possessing entity, which in this case seems to take a reptilian form, doesn't have to, actually controlling the perceptions of the person by literally hijacking their energetic fields. This is what's going on. And so when you look at that Swiss banker who gave an anonymous interview, I'm not surprised he did, actually anonymous, given what he said, in 2011 it was, for the Russian magazine Novy Den. And he said that these people, these bankers that he worked with in Switzerland, these people are corrupt, sick in their minds, so sick they are full of vices, and those vices are kept under wraps on their orders. Some of them rape women, they're pedophiles, and many, he said, are into Satanism. Quote, when you go into some banks, you see these satanistic symbols, like in the Rothschild Bank in Zurich. These people are controlled by blackmail because of the weaknesses they have. They have to follow orders, and they will be exposed, they will be destroyed, even killed. So when you look, I mean, what a classic, Henrik, what a classic example of lack of empathy.
Yeah.
That the banking system, look at what they've done since 2000, not what they did before, but look what they've done since 2008.
Sure, yeah.
You have destroyed billions of lives while they keep giving themselves bigger and bigger bonuses after taking vast amounts of money from the very people through governments that they're crushing. What level of lack of empathy, what level of distortion, what level of inversion does it take to act like that? And I said these people are fundamentally and massively possessed by this course.
I think it's completely according to plan in the point of reformation we are in the global state of the system right now as well. I think it really plays into that. And why don't we pick that up right after a break here, David? I want to discuss a few more things before we do that, though. Obviously, for those who don't know yet, then we're talking about David's new book, The Perception Deception, an excellent read. It brings a lot of the dots together. Welcome back, everybody. We are talking with David Icke about the new book, The Perception Deception, and also the bigger picture, really, what is going on, the makeup of the world, and broad strokes here, obviously, in trying to basically nail down the experience that we're having. And I think, I mean, when I look back into history as well, you realize how much of this is part of our very very makeup, and to draw the parallel between what has been, quote unquote, real in the natural world, what has been artificial, are lines that I see that have been very much blurred. I mean, if we think back to it, we've had thousands of years of conflict with each other, with basic survival as the principles are on this planet. Tribal warfare, then we have warfare of nations, world wars. This is just something that's kind of part of our makeup.
Yeah, I'd say it was part of our program. And it's interesting. What you've just described, Henrik, is massive examples of the mass generation of this very energy that this distortion feeds off.
That's not something that's going to be easy to break, right? Because it feels like it's part of our genetic makeup at this stage. How do we get ourselves out of that, do you think?
Well, that's absolutely right. I think I couldn't agree more. It's exactly where I'm coming from. That this program was put in, well, on an energetic level, but in a holographic expression of that energetic level, it's within our genetic structure, and it's we're only able to override it by moving our point of attention or expanding our point of attention. For me, what we are in our infinite form is a point of attention with an infinite awareness. Now, that point of attention can be the entirety of infinite awareness. That's what I call the infinite, the all that is, has been, and ever can be. What am I describing? All possibility. Or we can have a point of attention so tiny we think we're Ethel Jones working down the store, and that's all we are. And most people, because of the program, because of the way that society is structured and the information sources of education and media, etc., what they're telling people to believe, most people are perceiving reality only through the five senses, a bit more, into the subconscious, but mostly overwhelmingly through the five senses. And if you do that, then the system has you. Because once you are perceiving only through the five senses, you have one place to look to get a grasp or a grip or an understanding of who you are, the nature of life, and the world you're living in. And that's basically outside of yourself. And what comes back from that, from the five senses, the media, education system, peer pressure, all these things. Basically, you're in this world and you are of it. And if your point of attention is that focused in the five senses, but if you can expand that point of attention to realize that you are infinite awareness having an experience as, a person who works in the store. It's not who you are. Your body is not who you are. Your name is not who you are. Your life story is not who you are. It's what you're experiencing. Your infinite awareness having that experience. Well, suddenly what you perceive through the five senses becomes very different. Not only that, because your attention goes out into consciousness beyond this reality, you're now getting intuitive insights and understandings into the reality you're directly experiencing that you would never get through the five senses because they can't access that level of awareness. And that's when, like I say, people in that state, that's the ones they call mad or crazy or eccentric or extreme, because they've seen the madhouse for what it is, and those in the madhouse still believe the madhouse is real and sane. They can't understand why anyone could say that it was crazy. And it's interesting when you look at the quotes of Don Juan Matus in the Carlos Castaneda books, the Central American shaman. He talked about the flyers to Castaneda, and he described them in the terms that we talk about in terms of the energetic archons, the energetic jinn, the energetic demons. And there's a quote I've got here from Don Juan Matus, which blew my mind when I read it a few years ago, because it's so spot on what I come up to see by that time. And he says to Castaneda, he's talking about this parasitic force. And interestingly, again, the Gnostics in the Nag Hammadi documents say that the archons are a parasitic force, that they do not have what is termed intentionality, what I would call creative imagination. And they can't have that because they're in a distorted state. Because of the distortion, they don't have things that in a balanced state others in that state have. So they have to manipulate humans, for instance, to create their own prison. And it's if you think about it in these terms, if you give them a blank sheet of paper, the archons couldn't put anything on it. They couldn't create anything.
Yeah. But
you give them a paper with things on it, and they will twist them and they will invert them. They can do that. And the other thing that the writings talk about is that the archons were experts at manipulating perception by creating illusions. It fits so magnificently. It's just staggering. Anyway, this quote from Don Juan Matus in one of the Castaneda books, in fact, the last one before he died, before Castaneda died, Matus said, "Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradictions between the intelligence of man the engineer and the stupidity of his systems of belief, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior." This is the point I made earlier, Henrik, about developing humans to the point where they can enslave themselves with technology, but not to the point where they can realize that that's what they're doing. He said, sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of beliefs, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. They are the ones who set up our dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. This is the distortion. It is the predator who makes us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. Put another way, they gave us their mind. They got the human energetic fields attached to the distortion, so they become more and more an expression of the distortion. They gave us their mind, and therefore they start to manifest the distortion's mind because they're so attached and influenced by it. And this is, I'm absolutely convinced of what has happened. It's my feeling, again, it's not something you'll hear every day, but it's my feeling that the Gnostics were absolutely right when they talked about the archons creating a bad copy of this, what we might call universe, of this reality, because people who have near-death experiences, often they have experienced an Earth which looked like this Earth, this reality, much better way of putting it, but it was much more vibrant. It was much more joyous. There was none of this negative, low vibrational emotion. And for me, what they were experiencing in that out-of-body state was the original copy, which is not a copy. It's the original reality, which still exists. Exists beyond the one we're experiencing. So if you think of it, I mean, it's great today with all the computer stuff on one level because we've got the analogies to make in terms of what we're genuinely and really experiencing. It's like taking a download copy. And originally, it was a bad copy, but it was a copy that reflected a lot of wonderful things in the original. And what's happened since is those great things still in the copy have been systematically destroyed, because in the archon world, what we call life, in other words, we need a planet of life to survive and interact with it. They are an inversion. They need death. They need death and destruction. And so what they've done is systematically change a copy of something that was about life, and they're turning it more and more into something that reflects their reality, which is about death. This is why when people say, Why are they killing their own planet? They're not killing their own planet. The vehicles we call the Illuminati bloodlines, they are merely vehicles of this force which feeds off death. Thus, they come and go. They're just vehicles to change this world into a world of death so this archontic force can take it over, to change its frequency and to change its atmosphere. This is what Fukushima's about. Yeah. This is why millions and millions of more radiation is in the atmosphere than there was 50 years ago. And you know that guy that is very controversial, but he would be, because he was challenging the scientific norm that he was once part of. But this guy, Ibn Alexander, is an American neurosurgeon. And in 2008, he virtually died from E. coli meningitis. And for a week, he virtually his entire brain shut down, including that part of the brain that scientists say are generating near-death experiences as an illusion. So it couldn't have been in his case. And only the most primitive part of his brain stayed alive to keep him alive. And he was like that for 7 days. He wrote a best-selling book called Proof of Heaven about his experiences, because for those who haven't heard of this, Ibn Alexander was a neurosurgeon, and he was brought up in an environment at home that was absolutely dominated, not least through his father, with the belief that mainstream science and material science was absolutely right, and anything out of that was wrong. He said in his book that being a neurosurgeon, he experienced people who died and then were brought back to life, and he said they told him these near-death experience stories, and he thought, yeah, well, very nice story, lovely story, but it can't be true, because consciousness can't exist outside the brain, because the brain generates consciousness. It doesn't. It's just a vehicle to to express consciousness in this reality through the hologram. But the reason I'm going here, in relation, Henrik, to what we've talked about so far, is that the first place that he went to, and if he was really stuck in the material version and vision of everything, that would have affected his frequency. And thus, it's not surprising that he went to an area, first of all, he went to some beautiful places, including seeing, again, this wonderful, beautiful, joyous, vibrantly colored Earth that looked like Earth, but there was no suffering, there was no negative emotion, there was no fear. This is, I would suggest again, that the reality of which a copy was taken, a bad copy was taken, which we call our world now. But the first place he went to, he calls the realm of the earthworm's eye view. I think it's what a lot of New Age people will call the lower astral. Anyway, what happened is he said that he found himself in this place, and he said it was like visible darkness, and he was like being submerged in mud, yet he was also able to see through it. He said he had a form of awareness, but no self-identity. He was just aware of where he was, but there was nothing else. He had no memory of anything else, just that I'm here. And like I say, he calls it the realm of the earthworm's eye view. He said he heard the sound of rhythmic pounding that was distant yet strong, a little like a heartbeat, but, quote, darker and more mechanical, like the sound of metal against metal, as if a giant subterranean blacksmith is pounding an anvil somewhere off in the distance, pounding so hard that the sound vibrates through the earth or the mud or wherever it is that you are. He said, quote, I wasn't human while I was in this place. I wasn't even animal. I was something before and below all that. I was simply a lone point of awareness in a timeless red-brown sea. He then said that gradually he started to regain more self-awareness and a bigger self-awareness. And this detachment that he felt, I'm here, but so what, I don't care, started to fade. And he said it started to, the place started to become scary to him. And he describes in the book how reptilian, worm-like creatures were crowding past him and sometimes rubbing against him with their smooth or spiky skins. Faces bubbled up out of the darkness and became ugly and threatening. The pounding intensified and became like, quote, the work beat for some army of troll-like underground workers. And here is a major point. He said he became aware of a smell, quote, a little like faces, a little like blood, and a little like vomit, a biological smell, in other words, but of biological death, not biological life. Because this place is, I say this is the archontic realm, and it's about death. Just as we what need to breathe life, it needs to experience and feed off death. That's why it wants to feed off low vibrational emotion. This is why Satanists that are interacting with these archontic entities, this archontic distortion in their rituals, this is why they are all about death. They're about sacrifice. They're about doing it in graveyards and anything to do with death. This is why wars are death rituals for these people. And interestingly, Satanists have told me over the years, former Satanists, so they say, many, many times, and it's interesting the way I've just described or read out what even Alexander describes he was hearing. And he said at another point that he heard dull roars that changed into dim rhythmic chants that were both terrifying and weirdly familiar. And what Satanists have told me is that when they're doing the rituals in our reality, the entities are doing a compatible ritual in their reality. Mm-hmm. And because the two rituals are interacting, they are basically creating a compatible energetic field that connects the two while the ritual's going on. This is why Satanists do the same rituals basically they've done since Babylon and before. It's because there's a certain energetic outcome that they generate. And once this compatible energy field created by the dual rituals in the two levels of reality it becomes powerful enough, these entities can slip through that gateway, that doorway, that energetic kind of connection into the rituals, and they can manifest. And people have told me many times how they've seen reptilian entities. They never said grey entities, funny enough, but reptilian entities and other demonic type entities they've described. And in fact, Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard both described doing what they called workings, which was to create a vortex or portal through which entities could come through and manifest. Similar thing. And the thing is that the more that society is manipulated, this reality is manipulated to reflect death and destruction, the more in frequency terms it becomes closer to this archontic frequency band, which I suggest that even Alexander was describing, and that therefore the more influence it has over this world. So when people say, what's the answer? What they're expecting is a structure of fighting the system, of fighting the enemy. But what use is that? That's just feeding the enemy as they perceive it. It's the old story. It can't be that simple. It is. We have to love each other. If we love each other and, love those that are trying to crush us, not to the point where we let them do it. My goodness me, I've been 25 years standing up to it. I go on doing it. But you don't do it with hatred. Otherwise, you're feeding the beast. And so these simple messages that mystics and others have delivered through human history. We need to love each other. We need to care for each other. We need to do things in integrity. This changes everything because we're no longer then operating on a frequency that this low frequency can influence and impact upon. And as the more this reality becomes dominated by death, destruction, and war and conflict and fear, we get closer to this archontic realm so that it can influence us more. This distortion, I mean, what was Ibn Alexander describing there except a manifestation of a distortion? But the more we open our hearts, the more we love each other, more care for each other, the more we have integrity between each other, vibrationally, frequency terms, the further away we go from this archontic realm, and the less and less and less influence it has in impacting upon our perceptions and our therefore behavior. It's so simple, but people don't want to go there because they're caught in the program and they're caught in another expression of the distortion. They think to fight the enemy, they have to stockpile weapons, and no way. It's not the way. A lot of people,
right.
The conspiracy research movement might not want to hear this, and they might just laugh and dismiss it and go and stockpile some more weapons, but they could do it forever. They're going to change a thing. Love is the answer, because the closing down of the heart vortex is what's got us into this mess, what's got us into this frequency.
Yeah, it's a very, very, it's a good point and interesting one as well. So where do you draw the line, I guess, in terms of the advancement of the, the global police state and the everything that's happening right now with invasions of countries, and you get to that position where you realize that, all right, at some point here, there might be people literally knocking at my door, trying to invade, into my home and into my life in certain ways. And it's happening with the tippy-toe tactics that you've mentioned. So it becomes increasingly difficult really to pinpoint, or again, the line that you have drawn and said, okay, here but no further, even that becomes kind of blurry and fuzzy. So where do we need to stand up and say no? And I mean, because at some point this is going to be turned into self-defense, right? And that an application of violence, is that right in those conditions, do you think?
Well, I would never go there. That's just me, because I'm feeding the beast if I do.
Yeah.
But what all of us have been trying to do while we've been in this arena is to stop it getting to that point by alerting people to what's planned. However, I've said all along that it's got to get a lot worse. Well, I'm not saying that now. I've said it before a long time ago. It's got to get a lot worse and more in your face before most people will see it, because they don't want to see it. They don't want to see it. It's like, just change the subject. I don't want to face it. I want to go and watch the football, or I want to go down the pub, or want to go and play a computer game or something. I want to escape from it. I don't want to accept that this is true. So there comes a point where it's so in your face you can't ignore it anymore, and that's where we are. And from here on in, Henrik, it's going to be an very, very interesting time, seeing how people respond to that. Because I know from being here at the People's Voice since we went on air in November, and the response we've had, and the response I've had walking around the streets of Wembley here in London, where I'm staying in a spare bedroom at the moment. I'm staying in a spare bedroom that's just big enough to get a bed in it, and me along the side to get in the bed, because I'm hardly ever there anyway. I'm in most of the time. But when you go into a pub or something, and people come up to you, you know the difference between that and what happened a few years ago, and by what they're saying to you that they've gone some way along the road to realizing what's going on. There's no doubt about it. Vast numbers of people are seeing it, and a lot of them are seeing it because it's being put in their face. It's becoming so blatant. So they become more open to it, and other people become more open to it that they talk to. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see where we go from here. But it is a bit of a race now, because on one level, you've got the awakening, which is absolutely happening, and not in the way that I would like it, and not to the depth of understanding that I would like it, but it's happening. But you've also got this police state, this technological surveillance grid in all its forms, unfolding faster and faster and faster. So I've always said that, well, not always said, of course, but I've said for many years that something around 2016, 2017, we're going to have a good idea which way this is going. Because by then the awakening will have met the suppression and oppression, and we'll see what happens. But if, there's a difference between fighting the system and not cooperating with it, because at all levels it requires our cooperation. Once we get to the Hunger Games society, the Equilibrium movie society, where people are taking drugs by law, and they're being measured that they've taken them. This is where we're going now with this nonsense about they're introducing where you swallow an edible chip with a drug, and your mobile phone goes off, or your doctor's does when your next dose is due if you've not had it. This is a stepping stone to this forced drugging. We're getting forced drugging in the water anyway, and the microchips. Once we get to that point, well, your mind's gone anyway. But before we get to that point, they still have to have our cooperation. And another quick thing: this transhumanism and replacing people with machines to do the jobs that this system wants. That's fundamental too in making humans expendable in terms of needing their cooperation. So we have a window of what we call time here, where the system still needs our cooperation to get to where it wants to go, to the point where it doesn't need it anymore. And so this is a vital, vital time. And if it needs our cooperation, then let's stop giving it. And once you open your heart, it all comes down to that. And once you start to realize that you are infinite awareness having an experience, then what happens to you becomes irrelevant anyway, because you're doing what you know to be right. And if anything happens doing that, well, it bloody well happens. I'm infinite consciousness. So what? I'm infinite awareness. I just move my point of attention to something else. Because if we go down the armed resistance route, well, symbolically and virtually, literally, you're trying to take on a system that has state-of-the-art weaponry, including energy weaponry and laser weaponry, with the equivalent of a pop gun. I mean, it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
But if we cease to cooperate, then they can't. At this point, they still will not be able to go forward, and anything like the scale they want without our cooperation. But if we continue to cooperate with our own enslavement out of fear or out of it's not my problem, then we will reach a point where they won't need our cooperation anymore, for the reasons I've described. So between now and 2016, 2017, Henrik, I think is the eye of the storm, if you like, and it's when everything is going to be decided.
Robot armies, who knows, how far this will go. It has to be a switch in people's attitude and understanding of what they're part of course. And then you have that interesting flip side to this, that the harder the authorities fight and push themselves, the more people will start to wake up to it because they become suspicious of it. I can't tell even from people in Sweden who I never thought would mention anything about this kind of stuff. It's like they're slowly getting onto it. They realize something's going on. They become that inherent resistance in them is growing, and to a certain extent, sure, they hardened in that process. But at the same time, that's a positive sign. It's a direction in the right direction. That there is, that I don't want to cooperate with this. I understand something is wrong, and it's horribly to see this, though, at the same time, how the world has hardened in the last 20, 15 years. And again, it's really, I would say it's really after 9/11 where this, the blatant fascist state have really unfolded. But it's, I don't know, some days it feels it's really dark, in that kind of process of what's going on.
Yeah, it is dark. And by dark, it is distorted. It is inverted. But you're absolutely right, mate. There are more and more people that are seeing it because, in many ways, a very simple thing. When you are manipulating covertly to bring about a transformation of the world in your image, or the image of your manipulation, then there comes a point, if you're going to do that, where the world in your image has to start to manifest in front of people's eyes. So I said years ago, there's going to come a point, a window of opportunity, when this stuff's going to have to break the surface where it could be seen, and then we've got a chance, because people that will not go there and look out, seek it out in the hidden, will have no choice but to see it in the seen and in its impact on their own lives. So this is an extraordinarily important point in this story, in this journey, where that which they want to transform the world into is becoming more and more blatant and more obvious and more tangible. And so those that even in the five senses who can only perceive the five sense tangible world, that's where it's happening now. It's come out of the hidden. It's not completely out of the hidden, or we'd be at the end of the road where they want to take us, but it's out sufficiently for it to be perceived by the five senses. So that gives us a chance. It gives us a chance. And there's the great line that I said years ago from that song, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. There comes a point where you've got nothing left to lose but to stand up for your freedom. And we're heading for that point fast.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Now, another perhaps somewhat of a strange point here, but the process of what derives the system, I guess we could just refer to Earth at the moment, or the solar system, whatever, and contained within that, we have nature, the climate, the overall biosphere, and everything else, the life within that. That system, that engine, the dynamo that is partly, I don't know how to call it, but shutting down. It feels sometimes like there are crutches being built, by the people in place, in the elite, basically, to keep the momentum of things going. It's almost like they want to take over the weather and manipulate it and do what they will with it, but at the same time, it's just a bizarre feeling I've had in the last couple of years that it feels like that dynamo of it is like shutting down, and now they're trying to take it over to keep it going, to keep the momentum of this, kind of experience that we have of this energy, their battery, if you will, so that it will sustain them and keep going. Do you see what I'm getting at? Bizarre point, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, in this reality, mate, there are no bizarre points. All bizarreness is legitimate, really.
Sounds good.
Level that we're at. But one thing, as I said earlier, they've taken this bad copy and they're seeking to take all the good things away and all the life out of it, sucking the life out of it, so it becomes a place of death, which is what they feed off and what their home environment is like, if you like. But what's also happening, I feel, and it's affecting a lot of people, there is an awakening, and part of that awakening is about the name of a book, the first book I wrote when I had my own original awakening, called Truth Vibrations. When I learned about a vibrational change, we chatted about it before on your show, that was going to wake people up. This is what I was told in 1990, that I was going to go out on a world stage and deliver great secrets, and in this period of the rest of my life, this Truth Vibrations was going to impact more and more on people's perceptions, and it was going to break up the solidity, and it was going to wake humans up from their coma. The ones that were least in a coma would wake up first, and then even people that were solid gold asleep would start to wake up. And so that's happening, and there is a kind of a defense mechanism against that, and that I suggest is that they are seeking to create a sub-reality, almost an isolated reality, in that part of the Earth's atmosphere that we humans interact with. Part of that is changing the radiation mix of the atmosphere, making it more and more irradiated for many reasons. And I think the chemtrails on one level come into this as well, into what I'm describing. Mm-hmm. And another element of this sub-reality is the internet. And if I can find the paper somewhere, there's doesn't matter, I can remember anyway. That I was reading this week about something that they're calling the outer net, and this is a wireless internet source from many satellites in space, which is being orchestrated by an organization which is funded in part by the Open Society Foundations of George Soros. That man that has humanity's best interests at heart. And this outer net is being sold as overcoming internet censorship by filling in all the gaps and actually coming from space so that it can't actually be blocked in the present internet system. And of course, George Soros and all those people connected to him, their life's work is to give people freedom of choice and freedom of communication. So obviously there's another reason for it. And I suggest that it's another layer of this sub-reality. If you go, high enough up into mountains and stuff, you could probably find places where you still have the ability for unmolested, largely unmolested thought without technological radiation interference and manipulation. But if it's coming from space, you've lost even that.
Yeah.
And for me, the internet has been created from the start to do this. But like all these elements in the control system, while they still need human cooperation, they have to be sold as a benefit. And there are many, many benefits in the internet. I mean, we're talking now and expressing one of those benefits. But of course, the idea all along was to sell the benefits and let the benefits run for a while, although I think the scale of this information circulating has surprised them and I think shocked them to a large extent.
Right.
But what they're doing now is using every excuse they can, and there's many more in the pipeline, to censor and shut down the good side of the internet, leaving only that which benefits them. What benefits them? It's a surveillance operator's dream, the internet, but also I say they're developing it as an electronic collective mind. Because we're biological computers. I saw a story this week which was really significant, very significant for the fella, but significant on a bigger picture. And it was the development of a artificial hand, which for the first time, they said, has the ability to feel texture, feel whether something's soft or it can feel akin to the human hand, not completely, but akin to it. And the reason they can do that is because the body's a biological computer, which in the brain communicates through electrical information exchange, and the technology communicates through electrical information exchange. If you can make those two forms of electrical information communicate with each other, then the hand can communicate to the brain, and the brain can feel touch, which it couldn't before in technology. And in the same way, they're talking now about having brain-computer internet interfaces and chips in the brain, which will be able to interact with computers and the internet without actually a keyboard and all these things.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's all part. This transhumanist whole deal is about making humans so connected to the internet world that it becomes a collective human electronic collective reality that supersedes the wider collective reality of consciousness communicating as one field, a unified field. And again, what's that doing? It's pulling you not only into the five senses, it's pulling you beyond them into technology. And that's the idea, to so connect us to the world of machines and the world of computers that they think for us. We no longer think for ourselves. Yeah. That's this sub-reality is designed to get us to attach to it, and beyond the internet attachment, to create a radiation fields in the Earth's atmosphere that are able to be conduits for information broadcast within human brainwave frequencies, so that it actually enters the brain and we perceive it as our own thoughts and our own perceptions. Here we are, the perception deception taken to the next level. And this is what smart meters are about, and the smart grids and anything with smart in front of it is designed to speak to all the other things with smart in front of it. And so when you have a radiation field from a smart meter in a business or a home, it's not only communicating, as even people like David Matthias, when he was head of the CIA, admitted. It's not only able to communicate information to a central point about how many people are in the house, what rooms they're in, how many times you open your fridge and all that. It's able to send information the other way into the field in your home and business broadcasting on human brainwave frequencies. So this is another expression, the smart grids and smart meters, of this sub-reality that's trying to connect us to. Again, and we keep coming back to it, the antidote to that is to open your mind to your true consciousness. And if you want to do it the quickest way, open your heart to your innate consciousness. That's the biggest opening to expanded awareness, much bigger than the brain, the mind. It's the heart vortex. And once you do that, you're getting your inspiration, you're getting your perceptions, you're getting your insights from beyond the realm that this archontic force can manipulate. Thus, you can see what those within the grasp of that force cannot see.
Absolutely. I think it's about the creation of an artificial biosphere, and that might be at the end of it completely digital, and maybe in the meantime we'll see something that has this kind of semi 50-50 interface. But anything could unfold in that type of world and reality. We'll probably have to take vaccines on a regular basis just to maintain our bodies, steroids, so that the body won't reject the mechanical parts implanted. I mean, this could just go in a number of different ways. But I think that there always will be an outside of it. I mean, we can see it with the accumulation of a combination of Agenda 21 pushing people off, the land and nature into the big cities, and you can see how this is going to be developed into these mega cities, mega hubs. You might have communication lines, or not communication lines, but underground trams or something connecting between those cities. But on top of that, outside of that, I still think there will be a natural world. Like so many movies and TV series have explained, like Tripods, a British series that showed that too. These people are living on the outside of that, who is viewed kind of like the Romans viewed the barbarians of old. They're not civilized, right? Not in the cities there. So.
Yeah, but you mentioned vaccines there. They're already developing genetically modified food crops that actually deliver vaccines.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
And deliver drugs. So you can see where that's going. And of course, you've got a water supply. What's happening in terms of getting people off the land? There are endless ways, making farming outside the corporations economically impossible, family farms, smaller farms. And we're going through something here in England at the moment, which is extraordinary levels of flood as a result of extraordinary levels of rain.
Yeah.
And on the People's Voice the other day, there was an interview with someone who'd worked at the European Union, who was saying that actually, see, what they're complaining about in one part of England called the Somerset Levels, which is an area obviously very low, hence levels, but the rivers and the canals have been cut out for a long time, going way back, and what they were doing was dredging them regularly, and so if you had a lot of rain, it doesn't matter because they were deep enough to deal with it. And then suddenly, and this has been a big row and scandal in Britain in the last 2 weeks, they stopped dredging them. And what this man was saying is that actually that was a European directive not to dredge, because actually he said he was aware of documents and legislation coming out of the European Commission, of course, unelected, which was that they weren't to be dredged because those lands were to go back to non-human use.
Yeah, look at that.
And so when the British government comes out and talks about dredging or not dredging, he was pointing out it's all a stage show, because they know at the highest level of government anyway, and certainly the civil service does, that they haven't got a choice whether they dredge or not, because the European Union is deciding whether they dredge or not.
Yeah.
And this other big thing, massive thing in relation to that, which has come out of nowhere and is now everywhere, all over the world, and that's fracking. The idea of fracking is, what's about fracking? It's about death and destruction. It's about killing the land.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is forcing this high-powered water into the geology of the land below the surface, full of 600 to 700 chemicals They're using phenomenal amounts of fresh water to do it. And once they do it, then the chemicals make it impossible to use again. It's getting into rivers. It's getting into drinking water supplies and below the surface of the land. And at the same time, it's releasing radon gas, which cumulatively is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
It's doing all these things. And what it's doing is, if you've not got a water supply, then you've got to move. Just as if your land is going to keep flooding because you're not dredging anymore, you've got to move. And so when you seal the sky, I mean, I've been reading some stories in the last few days. You've got areas of America that have got 10,000, in one case, 17,000 fracking wells.
Yeah.
And then you see the pictures of them, and what does the landscape look like? It looks like it's dead,
yeah,
which it is. These are designed, again, to drive people off the land and into these mega cities you talk about. But again, it's still about cooperation. There's a very few people fracking compared with those affected by it.
Well, exactly. And, again, the continuation, where are the EPA and the other environmental organizations in these situations? The government still gives, these companies, or if they're private, even they're smaller, businesses that do this as well, but they continue to give them the contract to do this and the rights to do it. They're protected under the law to destroy the earth in this way. And that's insanity, and it's all planned,
Yeah, it's insanity from our point of view, because we come from a point of view of life. But if you come from a point of view of death, it's not insanity, it's genius. And so, in this country, they're now not only giving fracking permissions all over the place, they're actually changing the law so they can frack under your house without you even knowing.
Yeah.
Without you having any say in it or even knowing they're doing it. And when they take all the checks and balances off to allow the free flow of something that is so blatantly destructive to life, here we go again. It's the agenda.
Yeah.
It's come out of nowhere, and yet all over the world there's these fracking protests which alert you to the scale at which it's happening, and you have. This is, again, the program, the distortion controlling your perception. You have police officers at these fracking protests around the world that are protecting the corporations and the fracking, which is destroying their drinking water and the land of their families and their children.
Yeah, beating the heads in of these protesters,
The protesters that are standing up for life, they are protecting those standing for death. And so that's what happens when the programs got you. You, as the Matrix movie said, you become so inured, so controlled by the system that you protect it from those that are challenging it.
Yeah, and they're all like, I'm just doing my job. I'm getting paid. Things are good for me. No problem there. And, at the same time, these are people who they don't do anything. They don't generate anything. They live off of, hard-earned, tax money that other people have worked for. And these government are just not generating anything. They're just taking it, stealing it, really, because it's involuntarily. And then they just fund the destruction of the whole mechanism. And that's why I always get so angry when people beg for more, government control or regulation and everything. It's like, are you going to hand over the same, even more power to these people? It's not going to work. The criminals are going to latch on to whatever system it is in place that has been granted to oversee the protection. People have to take their own, responsibility in that regard and wake up and like the police officer in that regard, he has to understand, what it is that he's doing and being part of. Otherwise, it's going to be lost.
But what's happened in the last at least 20 years, it's probably started before then, is that we've had a very demonstrably around the world, Britain included, very much included, the recruiting of people in authority, law enforcement, police officers, not on the basis of ability, not even on the basis of intelligence, but on the basis of personality. They have systematically employed the narcissists, the sociopaths, and the psychopaths. And it's very simple cause and effect. If you employ psychopaths, you get psychopathic behavior. Employ narcissists, you get narcissistic behavior, which, I mean, just go on YouTube and put in police brutality. I mean, crikey, you'll be there for a year watching videos.
Yeah.
And I've said to these people, you think you have power, you have no power. You have no power. The power's in your uniform, which is an extension of the state. It's not in you. I mean, take your uniform off. Okay, where's your power? Go and get another job. Where's your power? You have got no power. The power's in your uniform, and you're just animating it. And if it wasn't you, it'd be someone else. This is what they don't get, because people like psychopaths, they love to feel they have power over people, but they don't have power at all. It's their power's in the wardrobe, not in them. But that's the kind of personality. My father used to say, it's not just that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's that power attracts the corruptible. And that is true in terms of dark suits and politicians, and it's certainly true in terms of uniforms. And they've systematically recruited that personality type on purpose. And so you get, the genuine police officers who are trying to come from a genuine space of fairness. I mean, they're being driven out by the system and the narcissists and the psychopaths because they can't stand it anymore. And those that are staying put, every day must be a nightmare working in that environment, because I've talked to them. They know what's going on, but they feel there's nothing they can do about it because they speak out and they're gone. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And that's also a good point. That's a flip side of that argument, that you have, then all of a sudden you have a situation where all the potential good people kind of quit, and we let all the bad people just kind of take over and run the show. But I guess it all has to do with what you said earlier, that, all right, but if they are recruiting at a certain type of personality for those reasons, and they kick out everyone else that's good, then it would have to be a really clever person who would act like a psychopath, but then inherently has a good heart and trying to, change the organization from within or something like that. But that gets increasingly complicated. So we're kind of in a conundrum here, aren't we?
Well, I think, where it's all leading is that the population in general needs to cease to cooperate with their own enslavement. And, if that means policemen leaving the force, if you like, because they refuse to take part in the enslavement of others because they can see that's what they're doing, then that's a positive thing in a way. I know people will say, well, that will leave the bad guys to run it, but that's going to happen anyway, the way the system's going, because every time a decent copper retires or leaves, a psychopath is employed. It's not every time, but the majority of times around the world. I mean, America is an incredible example of that, and the TSA at the airports and other transport hubs now. There have been TSA people, decent people, who have actually gone on radio shows and spoken out and said, look, they're recruiting psychopaths on purpose, because they want them to intimidate the people coming through the airport. So, this is real. And in the end, the people have to unite. And if that means, people have to leave law enforcement because they won't enslave people, then that's as it must be. And they must join with the non-cooperators among the public, and let's join as one unit, Even at the Bilderberg event in the summer near Watford, or just on the outskirts of Watford, north of London, that I was at, with 2,000 people turned up. It was fantastic. In the grounds of the Grove Hotel, because in the end they were forced to let us go there because there's nowhere else for us to take so many people. And some of the police there that were policing it, not all of them, there were some unpleasant people there, but some of them, that they were basically saying, good on you, mate. We can see what you're talking about.
How about that? I do hope that there is a lot of people that are that slowly perform that kind of turn from within inside of the system, obviously to a certain extent, and then another part of me feels like I hope it just all crash and burns, and just really like try to start this process over again. But that's just that entire, internal dialogue rather that you have with yourself, in the terms that you try to understand the situation and nestle your way out of it, and try to find the right way to go. But this is what we do. We talk about it. We try to figure it out. We try to awake people along the process, and just try to create a better world, a better place. So that's it. But David, I think we should begin to round things up for this time. It's always a pleasure talking with you. It was great having you back again. I want to give you some more, if you want to give out some of the details here about the website, of course, the book again, The Perception, Deception, The People's Voice.tv. That's where you can see the live feed and everything else. And what about the Wembley? You have another one now in 2014, you said, in coming spring here?
Yeah, October 25th, Wembley Arena. Funnily enough, synchronicity and all that, it's about, 3 or 4 minutes in a car from where this studio of The People's Voices are. Kind of strange.
Oh.
But there are, it's called Wembley. There's a lot of meridian ley lines go through this part of London and down through central London, interestingly. Oh. It's a massive arena that holds 10,000 people, 11,000 people. And it's on October 25th. I'll be speaking all day, about 10 hours in 4 sections, and pulling the things together. And, I only speak at a big event in London once every 2 years, because I don't want to come back and just repeat what I said a year earlier or a few months earlier. I like to put some time between them, because then more and more understanding is more insights, more awareness, more information. So you can take it forward. Every time you do something, you've got to take it forward and progress. Otherwise, you're just going round and round in circles. I've been shocked over the years when back in the 90s I used to speak at multi-speaker conferences. I was always put on the little room at the end of the day when there was no one there, in those days, when I was starting out really in America, places like that. But I would watch some of the speakers talking about various subjects, and they were interesting, and that's good, and that was interesting. And then years and years later, like 10 years later, when I went to the last multi-speaker event I ever did, and a lot of the same people were there, and I dropped in and had a look, and they were saying exactly the same that they were saying 10 years or more earlier. And I don't see the point in that. It's like Socrates is supposed to have said, wisdom is knowing how little you know. Therefore, there's always more to know. It doesn't matter how much you think you know. Yeah. I mean, the Perception Deception is nearly 1,000 pages. And it's it's the result of nearly 25 years of research. But there's always more to know, always more to know. And tomorrow there'll be more to know, and tomorrow there'll be more to know. And that's the way I live my life, Whatever I know there's more to know.
Absolutely. That's what keeps us going. I think that's a really good outlook to have. And that also gives you a certain kind of, pause, both to let in new information, but also to, you process everything that you learn in a different way. Certainly there's good with knowing and understanding, but it's also good, I think, with a certain degree of uncertainty, so that you continue to question even what you've learned and everything. So we continue to exercise that the mental and the philosophical muscle. So that's a really good point, David. But let's give out the websites here again. Then davidicke.com, obviously the main website. Pick up the book right there, and then thepeoplesvoice.tv. Thanks again, David. Keep up the good work, and we'll touch base again soon.
Thanks, mate. Just very quickly on what you just said. It's very interesting. I don't believe anything. And people think, well, you've got to believe something. No. I have a perception of how I see things at any point in time. But it's not a belief. It's a perception of how things are at any point in time. But I also know there's always more to know. So I'm light on my feet. I've got my trainers on, and I'm ready to go anywhere the music, the information takes me.